laying truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV Chat starts now.
It's Monday, not exactly at 7 o'clock, but that's what happens when you get two people that love talking to each other behind the scenes. That's my fault. I don't look at the clock, and me and Dr. Mitcham were having a good discussion, but I am happy to see everybody. This gave everybody time to get on. Like, for instance, Kyle Thompson, the Kentucky Division Commander, he's on time tonight. That we should throw a parade. So I'm glad to see everybody. But yeah, no, y'all can blame me. Me and Dr. Mitcham love talking to each other. But it's good to see everybody. Good to see everybody. Hello, 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 hello. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? We have a great show for you planned. Of course, we are welcoming back Dr. Sandy Mitcham, famous historian and author. He has been on the show numerous times now, but we are happy for him to be back. Apparently I'm popular all of a sudden. Isn't it funny once you're bored, your phone doesn't blow up, but when you're working, your phone does? But I've been looking forward to having Dr. Mitcham back on the show for a while now, and I'm happy he is back talking about his new book, which I'm putting a link in the chat, and it'll be scrolling across the screen. Just for reference, tonight we'll be talking about his new book on Union Generals. And we'll also be talking a bit about his book on Confederate Generals. But I will say this. As most of you know, we have a new show coming on Tuesdays. We're still planning everything, still getting everything ready for that show. But if you want to get used to coming and watching something like Tuesday at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time, don't worry. I have a couple reruns scheduled. The rerun tomorrow will be on the Confederate Generals book with Dr. Mitcham. And next Tuesday, we actually did an episode on Confederate Generals from Louisiana with Dr. Mitcham. So those will be the next Tuesday's reruns. The link is in the chat to go support Dr. Mitcham's new books. I highly recommend you do. Again, a phenomenal historian and author. We brought him on numerous times, talked about his books, and I have read numerous books of his now. I haven't gotten this one yet. I will mess with Dr. Mitcham about that. He made a Union book, and all of a sudden, I stopped buying it, but maybe that says more about me than Dr. Mitcham. But I will be getting it. I just want to poke fun at him for a second. Great historian, great man. If you don't know Dr. Mitcham, he hates me reading his whole introduction, so I'm going to do that to mess with him while he can't defend himself behind the scenes. But he is from Louisiana. He attended Northeast Louisiana University, North Carolina State University, and the University of Tennessee, where he got his PhD. He has authored more than 40 books, including the famous book that we've talked about numerous times on the show, Bust Hell Wide Open, The Life of Nathan Bedford Forrest. It wasn't about slavery, exposing the great lie of the Civil War, which PragerU has a video on that. We made a whole episode rebutting it and have the book interview about It Wasn't About Slavery with Dr. Mitcham. Two great resources you should check out to combat the lies that academic historians, I use historians very lightly because I respect that title, have been using. He's also done the Vicksburg Bloody Siege and that turned the tide of the Civil War, Richard Taylor and the Red River Campaign, and the death of Hitler's war machines, and many others. He is a past Heritage Operations Officer of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, camp commander of the Thomas Magruder. Look, I can see him shaking his head. He's going to correct me on that. I'm just going to say he was camp commander of Camp 1714 to save us both some embarrassment. And of course, he has won the very prestigious Jefferson Davis Gold Medal from the United Daughters of the Confederacy and the John Cook Literary Award for Excellence in Southern Fiction by the Military Orders of the Stars and Bars. And I believe that was we've done an episode on that book too. I have it somewhere in my notes. The Confederate Secret Service and the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That is the book that won the Southern Fiction Award. So without further ado, so I don't take up any of his time and he doesn't call me later to tell me that I just stole all his time. I pulled a Kennedy and just took all his time. But without further ado, Dr. Sandy Mitcham.
Well, thank you, Moose. You want to ask a question? How do you want to field it?
Well, yes, sir. I'll go ahead and start with the questions. Again, this is a new book you've written on the Union Generals. So I guess the best way to start is, who do you think was the best Union general?
I would say it's a man most people have never heard of. His name was Emory Upton. He was a graduate of West Point in 1861. When the war started, his rank was cadet. When the war ended, he was a brevet major general commanding a corps. A corps commander at age 25, and did a great job of that. He did a great job at every level. He did a great job as an artillery battery commander. He then moved up into the infantry and became a brigade commander. And at Spotsylvania, he gave Robert E. Lee one of his worst moments. Union tactics, Confederate tactics too, featured broad attacks by infantry brigades and divisions. Well, he decided the best way to break the Confederate trench line was a column formation, attack a narrow space and attack it on the run and not allow his men to fire till they reached the Confederate lines. And the result was a dangerous breakthrough at the Mule Shoe in Spotsylvania. Had his senior officers acted promptly, it could have crushed the Army in Northern Virginia and inflicted a major defeat. Fortunately for us, they didn't. But they did break the line. They did eliminate the Mule Shoe, and they basically wiped out Allegheny Johnson's whole division and captured about a battalion's worth of Confederate artillery. So this guy knew his business. And then later, he fought in the Shenandoah Valley and was badly wounded in the 3rd Winchester. And after he recovered, they gave him command of the Cavalry Corps of General James Wilson's military division of the Mississippi, essentially an army group. So he commanded a cavalry corps at the Battle of Selma and inflicted the only real defeat Nathan Bedford Forrest ever suffered. Of course, he had a lot of advantages. He outnumbered them 4-1, and he was armed with repeating rifles. But hey, the proof's in the pudding. He won the battle. And then won the last, I think, significant battle in the history of the Confederacy at Columbus, Georgia. So he had made a distinguished career, and everybody knew it. So post-war, they picked him to tour Europe and examine the armies of Europe and Asia. He was fluent in German, French, and I don't know what else. But he did this. And when he came back, he wrote a 54-page recommendation that was later published by the U.S. Army. And what he did that changed the Army, and it continues today, is he institutionalized military excellence. He prior to this, we were mimicking the French more than anybody else. Well, he wanted to mimic the Prussians. He liked their academy, their Kriegs Academy, their War Academy, their war schools. And we didn't have much in the way of standardized schools. So there was a school for cavalry practice up at Carlisle Barracks, the artillery school for practice at Fort Monroe, Virginia. But our officers were not well trained. And we saw that in the Civil War. They filled a lot of cemeteries doing on-the-job training for their officers. There were 1,100 of them when the war began. And the Union Army was, had 2.8 million men serve in it. The Confederate Army had 800,000 to 850,000. Simply weren't enough good officers. And you can see it today. His recommendations were all adopted. I can't think of a single one that wasn't. And the modern U.S. officer who spends 20 years in the service will spend 8 of them in schools. And that's directly traceable to Emory Upton. His post-war life somewhat tragic. He married a beautiful woman in 1868, and she promptly came down with tuberculosis. Went to the West Indies to recover and died there in 1870. And he never remarried. He was kind of heartbroken, but he moved up in the ranks until about 1881. He commandant of Presidio, but he was having very severe headaches. We don't know if he had a brain tumor. Some authors think he did. It may have just been severe migraines, may have been brain cancer. Like I say, we don't know. They didn't do an autopsy. But in 1881, he shot himself in the head. And had he lived, he would have, there's no question, he would have been General-in-Chief of the U.S. Army one day. But that was the best they had. I think he was the second best general in the Civil War, right behind Nathan Bedford Forrest. And pretty close run thing, frankly.
Okay. And I'm glad you say that. And I know the answer. But, again, kind of throwing your specialties out there, you've done 2 books now on war between the states generals. So I guess, who do you think is the best general from the war, and why?
Well, I would say Nathan Bedford Forrest. He was an American phenomenon, first grade dropout. I spent over 20 years in the service as active duty, reserve, National Guard officer, cadet, and so forth. I graduated Command and General Staff College, qualified through the rank of Major General. And he knew more the first day he put his bottom on a saddle than I did after over 20 years. He just absorbed it from the air. He was a private and rose to lieutenant general in 4 years. And he was a first grade dropout. He never could write properly. And he didn't even know military terminology. In his first battle, he wanted to catch him in the flank, but he didn't know what a flank was. So he ordered him, charge him on both ends. And they did, and it worked. And 180 engagements, and won some incredible victories, like Lawrence Plantation. Yankees outnumbered him 4-1, and no Yankees escaped. That's pretty remarkable. And you talk about Bright's Crossroads. A lot of people think that was his greatest victory. It was about 13,000 Yankees, 3,200 rebels. Took them 9 days to go from their staging areas near Memphis to near Guntown, Mississippi, Bethany, Mississippi area. Took them 2.5 days to get back. But they were unencumbered by things like artillery and ambulances and caissons and supply wagons. Forrest had them all. Okolona, I thought, was even more impressive to me. They had 7,000 cavalrymen, but they were armed with Sharp's carbines, considered the best cavalry weapon in the world at that time by a lot of people. Forrest met them with 2,500 men, so it was almost 3-1 in favor of the Yankees. But 600 Forrest men were unarmed. He told them, get in the line anyway. You can't shoot, but you can yell. And don't worry, you will have your pick of plenty of good northern weapons shortly. And this was the Green Berets of the Yankee cavalry. They were handpicked, got the best horses. They were unencumbered by anything. The only wheel vehicles they had was cannons and ambulances. And Forrest tore a limb from limb and chased them 11 miles. He also enjoyed the combat. He didn't like war, but he enjoyed hand-to-hand combat. He put in an advertisement in the Memphis newspaper once. Come on, boys, let's have some fun and kill some Yankees. And he meant that. He killed 30 in one-on-one combat. And probably seriously wounded another 60. And he, of course, was personally wounded several times, 4 of them you would call severe or serious. But he, in my view, was the best of the bunch. And Jefferson Davis later came around to saying so. Forrest was great at raiding behind enemy lines, cutting supply lines, and he was the best person to destroy a railroad in the Civil War. If you had to pick one, you'd pick him. Sherman and his men would rip up rails and heat them in the middle and wrap them around trees, and they called them Sherman's neckties, and they made a good picture in the northern newspapers, but it was hardly efficient. What Forrest would do is start little fires all up and down the line on the rails, and it would warp them 3 or 4 inches, maybe 2. Not much, but you couldn't run a train on it. And before the Yankees could get their railroads back in operation, they had to rip out their own useless rails. So why rip up the rails yourself and you make the Yankees do it? And to add insult to injury, the wood he used was Union cordwood made to propel their locomotives. And Forrest wanted to, when Sherman was driving on Atlanta, he wanted to cut behind him, cut his rail. And that would have been a disaster for Sherman. He had 135,000 men, 35,000 horses and mules. And he had like 700 something wagons. That wasn't enough to feed them. He depended on one rail line, over 400 miles long. And he later ran into Forrest on a steamboat after the war. It's the only time they ever had a conversation. And I wish somebody had been able to record it. They went to a table, and we only have snatches of it. But Sherman told Forrest, when he was driving on Atlanta, he had nightmares about Forrest destroying his railroad. And Forrest said, had they let me go, I would have made your nightmares come true. And he would have. And Jefferson Davis said that later he realized he'd made a mistake. He'd listened to his military advisors. They didn't use Braxton Bragg's name, but he was a senior military advisor at that time, and he had a low opinion of Forrest. And I think Davis listened to Bragg and didn't release Forrest. And consequently, Atlanta fell, and that was our last chance to win the war. I'm of the opinion the South had 3 chances to win the war. They could have won it diplomatically, militarily, or politically. We lost it diplomatically when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, because the lower class French and English would not have tolerated a war that was framed as being about slavery. That Abraham Lincoln, understood PR. And the other, militarily, I think we realistically lost the chance to defeat them militarily at Gettysburg and Vicksburg. And politically, though, we had a good chance. All we had to do was not lose, keep fighting until the November 1864 election. And if Lincoln was defeated, the Democrats had a peace platform. Anything was possible, including a negotiated settlement. And among the people who agree with me on this is Abraham Lincoln. He thought he was going to lose that election until Atlanta fell on September 2nd. Of course, the election, I think, was November the 8th. So that's how close we came. And if Forrest had cut that railroad, no way Sherman could have taken Atlanta. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The Union Generals, I never intended to write a book about them, but Regular History, my book on the Encyclopedia of Confederate Generals, did very well. And they asked me if I'd write a book on Union Generals. I said, we want you to write an encyclopedia on them. And I said, I want you to double my advance. And they did. So I wrote it. It was interesting. Space became an issue. Encyclopedia of Confederate Generals, there were 426 of them. So I was able to write an essay 490 words long on the average on each general. But with 588 Union generals, it was down to 402. So I had to cram it in and lose some stuff, and kind of hate that. But publishing is a business too. And, multiple volume books lose money. So anyway, it was fun. Met some interesting characters, so to speak. One of them was Lafayette Baker. He was called the Czar of the Underworld. He was head of the National Detective Police Bureau. And he arrested a lot of Union people for crimes they might commit. There was suspension of the right of habeas corpus in Mr. Lincoln's America, which Davis never did to any extent. And this guy was shady. His people eventually shot John Wilkes Booth, which led to his promotion to brigadier general. But he took the position that Secretary of War Edwin Stanton was deeply involved in the plot to assassinate Lincoln, and even said so. And Baker survived a kidnapping attempt and 2 assassination attempts. And then in 1868, he was found dead. And the official cause of death was spinal meningitis. His family however, insisted on an autopsy, and the cause of death was changed to arsenic poisoning. So a lot of stories about Lafayette Baker that haven't been told. There were, let me say, quite a few others. Spoon's butler, you're probably familiar with. I called him Beast Butler. His problem was a lack of maturity. You can defeat the Confederate armies, and they did. You can kill Confederate soldiers, and they did. But if a Creole lady walks by you on the sidewalk and you speak to her and she sticks her nose up in the air, there's really nothing you can do about it. And I don't know if you know any Creole. Some of them stick their nose so far up in the air you think they'll flip over backwards. But they were strongly pro-Confederate. They would cross the streets so they wouldn't have to pass by Union soldiers. They would cross the streets so they wouldn't have to touch the shadow of a Union flag. And Butler didn't know how to handle this. He called in Father Murphy, and because he had heard a report that he refused to preside over the funeral of a Union soldier. And he chewed him out pretty good. And Father Murray said, when he got a word in edgewise, he said, "General, you've been misinformed. Nothing would afford me greater pleasure than to preside over the funeral of you and all of your men." You know the story when a New Orleans lady emptied the contents of a chamber pot over Admiral Farragut's head. He issued a decree that any woman who treated Union soldiers rudely would be treated as a prostitute plying her profession. Well, that almost created a revolt. And Abraham Lincoln's up in Washington. He wants to use Louisiana as his showpiece for Reconstruction. And things were just totally out of hand in New Orleans, so he fired Butler. And they replaced him with Nathaniel P. Banks, who was also a poor field commander, but he knew how to treat people better. And it worked out better for Lincoln until the famous Red River campaign, which I've written a couple of books about. But Spoons ended up, he was a political appointee. Lincoln had a great many. And that's why at the upper levels, the Confederate Army, generally speaking, was better than the Union Army until near the end of the war. Because the Yankees only had two general ranks for much of the war, Brigadier General, Major General, and there the list ended. And they had 2.8 million people. President Davis early on had Brigadier General, Major General, but he immediately realized they needed another rank. So he created the rank of General or Full General. And then in the second year of the war, he decided that wasn't enough. So he created the rank of Lieutenant General between Major General and General. And this helped the Confederate Army. Well, those ranks didn't exist in the Union Army. They only had one Lieutenant General, Ulysses S. Grant. Early in the war, Winfield Scott held a brevet, an honorary rank of Lieutenant General, but that exhausted the list till near the end of the war. And Lincoln clogged it with some pretty incompetent people. His friend Senator Baker was a brigadier general, and Lincoln was going to promote him to major general, even though he hadn't seen action. He only was stopped because Baker led a raid in Confederate line near Leesburg, Virginia. It's called the Battle of Ball's Bluff. Well, he crossed the river, but he only had 4 boats, and Confederates acted quickly under Shanks Evans and pushed him back, and Baker was shot in the head and died. Lincoln was very upset, but he couldn't blame Baker for political reasons. Through his superior, General Stone, who was quite a good general, threw him in jail. Stayed in prison for over a year without charge or trial. So early on, having Lincoln as commander-in-chief, and I know some people are going to hate this, was a major advantage for the South. Lincoln had no military experience except 90 days in the Black Hawk War. All he succeeded in doing there was get demoted from captain to private. He never heard a shot fired in anger. And Jefferson Davis was a lieutenant in the same war. He did 1 combat patrol, personally captured Chief Black Hawk and ended the war. So a little bit of a difference there. He was educated at West Point, colonel at commanded the 1st Mississippi Rifles at Buena Vista, saved the U.S. Army there, and then later was an excellent Secretary of War. So that was an advantage, and Northern historians don't like to hear that, but it was. And he knew these people. And he wasn't, there weren't that many politicians at the higher Confederate ranks as there were in the Union Army. And consequently, we filled fewer cemeteries. Anyway.
But I hate to interrupt you. We're going good. We're going to get back to the program in just a minute, but it is time for our Pop-Tart break, our commercial break. And so I'm going to thank our sponsors real quick. Of course, our sponsors are scvchat.com. If you want to get a list of some of our favorite archived episodes, some of them have Dr. Mitcham episodes, you're more welcome to go check out scvchat.com. Of course, you get to see our t-shirt store, our favorite video of the month, so much more at scvchat.com, so please check that out. And, of course, we couldn't do these episodes without our Patreon members. For just $10 a month, you can go to Patreon and support us. We have multiple tiers now. If you just want to contribute and help us out, you can check out the $2.50 a month tier or slot. Then we have $10 a month. You get some extra content and some stuff like that. And we're working on getting back with some more extra content for y'all, as well as expanding what content we provide. Of course, we have a merch tier now. If you want more merchandise, you can select that for $30 a month. And, of course, if you want to be a full-fledged sponsor of the show, you can click the $80 a month sponsor, and you'll get a nice thing I'm working on to help out our sponsors and give y'all a bit more during the commercial breaks. But our sponsor for this episode is Dr. Chris Cummins. If you are in the northern Mississippi area and got knee pain, go check out Dr. Cummins. Great doctor. Southern hospitality is their specialty. They're going to treat you well, treat you nice, and make sure they get you feeling 100% again. So go check out Dr. Chris Cummins, and we want to thank them for sponsoring tonight's episode. So go check them out, and we will be right back after this commercial break.
I got into the SCV after receiving an award back when I was in high school. I had no clue what the SCV was. All I knew was that it was a rebel flag and it was supposed to be racist. I decided I would go and look further into it. Everything that we're taught from a very young age is that the Confederacy was wrong. They were treasonous. But it turns out it wasn't just because the South had slaves. This is because of a very fundamental principle of big government. There's nothing more American than keeping the government in line. It's what we were bred to do. It comes down from 1776, Declaration of Independence. It's because we decided to keep a government that we've deemed tyrannical in line. That's what the true definition of the cause is. Me being a young Black American and being a part of the Sons of Confederate Veterans is a shock to a lot of people. The Black Confederate soldier would have had to have been one of the hardest working soldiers there was. These are men who decided to take up a cause because in the end, it was their own cause. In fact, most owners wanted the slaves to stay back because that was how they were steadily making income. They made a choice to do something that was bigger than themselves. That's why, as a Black Confederate now, it is my duty that I owe them to do something greater than myself. Confederate history is American history, and you cannot separate the two. I am Sammy Travis, descendant of Private Benjamin Rowe, a Confederate veteran.
Nominal commercial break as always. And before I get into the next question, I do want to remind everybody that the links for Dr. Mitcham's books are in the chat below, so please go support him. And so now I'm probably going to ask you one of the questions I've been looking forward to, because it is a question that is asked a lot online in the historical world. It is a very heated debates a lot. And normally, of course, you get these biased or fake historians, I like to call them, because, you know, historians today really aren't doing a good job of being historians. But this is one of the questions that I've been looking forward to. Who had the best generals, the North or the South?
Well, it really depends on when. I think the issue is not a matter of the orders of magnitude, but degrees. They both had pretty good generals. The South, early in the war, just clearly had the best generals. I mean, the Union commander supposed to take Richmond was a man named McDowell. He was brave and energetic, but he was a supply officer. He had never held a command. Their general-in-chief was Winfield Scott, one of the greatest generals in American history, but he was too old for this war. He did come up with a plan that eventually defeated the Confederacy, the Anaconda Plan, but Lincoln didn't adopt it until the second year of the war, basically. There may be a little bit of bias here, but I think we did overall. Yeah. Part of the problem, the Union generals, many of them got shot and they'd go home. Confederate generals got shot, they took medical leave, and then they came back to the front. And that gave us an experience edge. Of course, we had a lot of generals killed, 77 of them. And a lot of more were crippled. But that was true of the enlisted men, too. General Grant complained about it. He said that Union soldier would be captured, get released, he'd go home, and he may or may not come back. And he certainly wouldn't come back for 30 to 60 days. And he said a Confederate soldier got captured, released. He was back in his unit in 2 days. I think I think we did have an edge in the generalship. Part of it's because the war was here. If you were a successful lawyer up north in Rochester, New York, or Buffalo or somewhere, you might decide to stay home and pursue your career and try to build it. Or if you were a dentist or a doctor, the same principle might apply. In the South, the war was here. And women of the South, as Sherman and Seward and others said, were a major contributing factor to the Southern Army. I told the story, I may have told it on this show, about General Sherman captured Savannah. And he ordered all the wives of Confederate generals to leave the city. Well, they packed their bags and they were ready to leave. And the Union officers decided they were going to search the suitcases. Well, the ladies said, "You most certainly will not. So I will not allow you to place your filthy hands on my silky drawers." And they didn't. They dug in and finally ended up before General Sherman. And he said, "You Southern women are the hardest cases I ever saw. This war would have been over long ago if it hadn't been for you. I believe you'd keep this war going for 30 years. And he turned to his officers and said, "Leave the suitcases alone." Of course, they were, look for jewelry and steal it is what they're going to do. And that was a major factor because the Southern men, if they were in a town, most of them were small agricultural communities. If you wouldn't go off to war, you were ostracized. Women wouldn't have anything to do with you. A story up in Farmerville, Louisiana, near where I live, illustrated it very well. I never was able to confirm it, but I believe it now. One boy just didn't want to go to war. He wasn't patriotic. He didn't want to get shot. Well, one day he was walking down the sidewalk and a herd of women attacked him, flew into the sidewalk and put him in a dress. And history doesn't record whether they put makeup on him or not, but I hope they did. And that applied to the upper class as well. I mean, you had your leaders of the community, political leaders, legal leaders, businessmen. If they wanted to continue in their profession after the war, they better put on a gray uniform. And, a lot of it was patriotism too. I mean, they were invaded, and that meant a lot in 1862, 64, and so forth. Americans today don't realize exactly what that meant, but Southerners know. And that's why we stayed in the field so long. Establishment historians like to quote the population figures. Most of them put the Union population at about 22.5 million, Southern population at 9 million. And what that does is minimizes the odds because they never segregated out. 3.5 million of that 9 million were slaves. And I would only count them as a military factor if I believed that they served in the same proportion as the white Confederates. Well, they didn't. I think about, near as I can tell, the figures are kind of soft because of the destruction of documents at the end of the war. But there were about 80,000 to 96,000 black Confederate soldiers, as opposed to 191,000 black Union soldiers. So if you look at just the white population, which I believe is the only way to properly do it, you have 22.5 million Yankees, as opposed to 5.5 million Southerners. That's a 4-to-1 ratio. That's pretty long odds. And then Lincoln, of course, recruited mercenaries on a massive scale. He had, 489,920 mercenaries recruited from 15 foreign countries. Many Southern prisons. A lot of the people couldn't even speak English. When Sigel invaded the Shenandoah, his orders were always translated into German, Hungarian, and English. Mercenaries played a major role. And it's rather interesting to compare the Germans. In World War II, most historians consider them the best soldiers. In the Civil War, they were considered among the worst soldiers. And I think the difference was the cause. The German mercenary was, what's he paid, $15 a month? He got free passage over. He'd already gotten that. And he really wasn't invested in the Union cause. Restore the Union, what did he care? Free the slaves, well, didn't care much about that either. And whatever you want to say about Nazi Germany, may not be sure what they believed in, but they were certainly sold on the idea. And I read a book by a Confederate Sergeant Major. He said they weren't much use in combat, but they could drive wagons and such and release good American soldiers for use at the front. So the North had every advantage, except courage and brains.
So I guess that kind of leads up to the next question. We talked about, some of the best Union generals. Who were some of the worst Union generals?
There was I think he won a Pulitzer Prize, James Howell Street, and he listed, he talked about the best and the worst. He listed Braxton Bragg as worst Confederate general. And under the heading of worst Union generals, he said, I have no idea. There's too much competition. To me, Elijah Payne was the worst. He was a West Point graduate, fought the Seminoles, got out of the service, became a lawyer in Illinois, a good friend of Abraham Lincoln. And they gave him command of a regiment and a brigade, and he performed poorly everywhere. New Madrid, Island Number 10, Siege of Carth. And after that, they simply used him in territorial commands. And he commanded Western Tennessee and Western Kentucky at various times. They gave him command there at Gatlin, Tennessee area, where he developed a reputation for cruelty. People were shot and hanged without trial or evidence. The accusation enough was enough to kill. He was not interested in the facts. He'd sometimes put suspects on old horses and told them to run. And his men would run them down and kill them. He hanged more than 100 people in the public square of Gallatin, Tennessee alone. One author wrote that he just wanted to see a dead body. There was a Private Dalton who deserted the Confederate Army, took the oath of allegiance. The next day, Payne had him hauled out and shot him personally 6 times, killed him. He was also corrupt. He stole fenced furniture by the wagon load. He sent it back to Illinois. He was eventually investigated and found guilty of corruption, extortion, fencing stolen goods, unjust taxation, and immoral behavior. Lincoln protected him because they were friends. But Sherman finally got enough of him after formally reprimanded him for brutality toward civilians. He sent him home. Said, man has no place in my army. And if Sherman would do that, you're pretty brutal.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was horrible. It was General O'Neill, who was pretty bad up in Missouri too. But people like Boyle and Payne in Kentucky, more Kentuckians served in the Union Army Confederacy, probably about 2-to-1 ratio. But they said after the war, Kentucky was the most pro-Confederate state there was. And it was because of bad Union generalship. They put the second, third-rate people commanding territories, and they did not win the hearts and minds of the people. In fact, there were a lot of Confederate raiders and guerrillas and so forth, and that was one of the reasons. There were some others I was reading about. Schemheindelfening, Alexander Schemheindelfening. He was a German general. They hired a lot of mercenaries. This was better than most, but his troops tended to run away. And at Gettysburg on the first day they broke. The Confederates poured into the town. As you know, Gettysburg on July 1st was a Confederate victory. And he got surrounded, and he hid in a culvert and then made a break for it and was climbing a fence. And he had foresight enough to remove his badges of rank. And as he was climbing his fence, a Confederate soldier tapped him on the back of his head with the butt of his rifle and flipped him over the fence, and he's laying there semi-unconscious. But they didn't know he was a general, so they left him. They just went on. And he then, when he regained his senses, took shelter in the only place he could find, a pigsty. And he spent 3 days in a pigsty. He didn't have any water, and the only food he had was what the pigs left. But the Confederates joked later that was a pretty good place for a Union general. But when Lee retreated on July 5th, he was able to escape. Ended up occupying Charleston. He was the first Union general in Charleston, South Carolina. So his Union mercenaries went. He was better. He was a communist. Most of them were. There was one called Osterhausen, who I had a great deal of respect for. He became a corps commander, Sherman. But one of my favorite stories is this Private McBride in Mississippi Regiment, I think the 45th. They were in the Stone River campaign, Battle of Trahoon, and he and his company commander, Captain O'Connor, who told this story, were cut off and they escaped. Well, the Yankee cavalry was on them, and they came to a fence, and it had rained, and they couldn't climb the fence. So they had Yankee cavalry on three sides and fence on the other. Well, O'Connor threw up his hands. McBride didn't. He jumped on the Yankee commanding the cavalry detachment, a major, and almost bit his finger off. He ruined his finger before the Yankees could pull him off. And some of the Yankees wanted to kill him. And others said, no, he's a prisoner. We can't do that. And I said, well, that Osterhausen, so then I think he was a colonel at that point, we'll let him decide. And they hauled him in front of him, and the German looked him up and down and then said, I want you to accord him every right due a prisoner of war, and I want every one of you to fight just like he did. So there was a lot of variation there. Most of the German generals were appointed for political reasons, and that usually led to a disaster. Lincoln felt like he needed to do that. Anyway, that's what else you got there, Moose?
All right. Well, I mean, while you were writing these books, or this book, what are some of the lesser known Union generals who had an interesting story?
Oh, there was that's basically what my book's about. There were quite a few of them. I liked Curtis. Newton Curtis, he was a giant of a man. He was from upstate New York. I read his book on his regiment, the 16th New York, and he made it very clear that he was fighting to preserve the Union, not any other reason. Right after Fort Sumner was fired on, he enlisted. And this guy was 6'7", weighed 225 pounds. At that time, the average American was in the Union Army was 5'7" and weighed 143 pounds. So he was a giant. And his family tried to talk him out of it because they said, you're so big, you will attract more lead than anyone else. You get yourself killed. He came pretty close. He was shot. He was fairly seriously wounded 6 times. Mm. And the last time was the Battle of Fort Fisher, the second one, where he won the Congressional Medal of Honor. But he led the breakthrough that led to the fall of the fort. Well, the thing about when you lead a breakthrough like that, the Confederate artillery, which is slightly behind the lines, can see it. And they're going to turn every cube against you. And they did. And one of the, he was hit with shrapnel on the arm, but also right below the left eye, which destroyed the socket and blinded him in the left eye. Mm. Then he, actually later, he got the 30-odd years later, they awarded him the Medal of Honor for it. But he was a very brave man. And later a congressman. And he tried to get, he was in favor of reunification. There were some other good ones. Frederick Steele captured Little Rock at virtually no cost. He was not popular with the administration. He married a Southern woman, and he treated Southern civilians well. And they called him a copperhead behind his back, but he was very good at what he did. Later played a major role in the capture of Mobile. Um, I liked him. He was killed in a carriage accident in San Francisco a couple of years after the war. Phil Kearny was one of the more interesting ones. He was a very rich man. He inherited a fortune that's modern equivalent of $25 million.
Oof.
So he didn't have to do anything. He could have lived a life of wealth and privilege. Instead, he joined the U.S. Army, fought in Mexico, became an aide to Winfield Scott, who called him the bravest man I ever met. Churubusco, his arm was shredded. He lost his left arm. But he was making a career out of the Army despite his wealth. When his marriage fell apart, so he shacked up with this other woman in an era when you didn't do that. They can get away with it today, I'm sure, but not then. And he was forced to resign, went to Paris, had a child by his mistress, and then his wife finally decided to grant him a divorce, so he came back to the States. Joined the Army when the war began. Like I say, didn't have to. Outfitted his own cavalry unit at his own expense, and was very brave, and quite successful for a while. But after the defeat of the Union Army at the Second Manassas, Abraham Lincoln was even considering to make him commander of the Army of the Potomac.
Mm.
But at Chantilly or Ox Hill, right after Second Manassas, he blundered in to the line of the 49th Georgia, and they ordered him to surrender. And he shouted at his aide, they couldn't hit a barn. He turned and ran away. And guess what? 49th Georgia could hit a barn. Shot him right through the heart. And Apey Hill came up shortly thereafter. He was friends with Kearny from the old Army. And said Kearny deserved a better fate than to die in the mud. But he did. His death reminded me of James McPherson, the Army commander up there in Atlanta. He blundered into Confederate lines and was... he and his aide had sense enough when they ordered him to surrender. He actually surrendered. And McPherson made a break for it, and they shot him dead. And the Confederates asked the aide, who is this general? And the aide said, sir, you have killed the best man in our army. They named that fort up in Georgia after McPherson. Now, there were quite a few lesser knowns. I liked Green Clay Smith. He was called Clay's, part of the famous Henry Clay family. He could have enjoyed a life of wealth and privilege his whole life. But he volunteered for service in the Mexican War, served as a lieutenant. He was a Unionist. He had slaves, but he thought the war was for preservation of the Union. He joined it and was promoted rapidly, colonel, brigadier general, and he faced John Morgan. And always came out second best. And Boyle, the commander of the district up there, wrote Halleck a dispatch that, can't you take General Smith off our hands? He went by the last name of Smith. And they did relieve him. And just kept him around for court martials or whatever. So he was a poor general, but he was a much better man than he was a general. He went to Congress, was governor of Montana Territory for a few years, but mainly he was a pastor from, I think it was, don't quote me on years, 1869 to the turn of the century. He's very good at it, holding revivals and whatever. So you run across this in several places. Some men are better men than they were generals. Others were better generals than they were men. Some were good at both, and some were good at neither. I don't know if I ever told you about General Scott, Robert Scott. He was a good general. Then later became the carpetbagger governor of South Carolina, where he stole everything that wasn't red hot or tied down. And he finally had to flee the state, but he was rich. And South Carolina, as a result of the Reconstruction era, didn't pay off their Reconstruction debts until 1955. And Scott went home wealthy. His 15-year-old son was an alcoholic. And one night he didn't come home, and Scott figured he'd spent the night with this 23-year-old man. Draw your own conclusions. And he went to the guy's house, and he asked to see his son, and the guy refused to allow him to. Nope, he's asleep, you can't bother. And then, according to Scott, his gun somehow discharged and killed the 23-year-old. Well, they put him on trial. And apparently he bribed the jury because it's pretty obvious he'd killed this fellow, but he was acquitted. And a lynch mob decided they were going to take out Scott. And they came to his house. And Scott met him with 2 barrels of whiskey and a handful of greenbacks. And the mob stopped and decided that they would abide by the decision of the court. They took the money and the whiskey and left. And that's where we get the term getting off scot-free. Other Union generals were much different. General Grierson, he was did you see the movie The Horse Soldiers with John Wayne? He was the one that Colonel Marlowe was supposed to have been patterned on, but extremely loosely. John Wayne in that movie was nothing like the real Grierson. He was a section hand in the movie. In reality, he was a music teacher. He liked to compose songs, and he didn't like horses. But General Sherman said he was the best cavalry officer he ever saw. Every time he fought a battle, he won, unless the commander was General Forrest, in which case he never won. But the people of Mississippi respected him because if one of his soldiers got out of line with a civilian, Grierson would come down on him like a ton of bricks. If you were a Union soldier and you wanted to enter the home of a Southern person, you knocked on the door. And you were not allowed to steal. And he kept them under tight control. And later, he commanded U.S. colored troops, USCT, the official name, out west, the Buffalo Soldiers, and helped establish their reputation. He was the one who defeated Geronimo. And the idea was that take your USCT troops, put them around every water hole. The Apaches would have to attack, and they would outnumber the black troops, but it was obvious where they were coming from, and there was no element of surprise, and they were able to force Geronimo back to the reservation. So Grierson had a brain. Anyway, there were a lot of generals that nobody ever heard of, which is the focus of my books, both Encyclopedia of Union Generals and Encyclopedia of Confederate Generals. You're going to meet some people in there that you never heard of before, and some of them are actually edifying.
Well, as we kind of wrap up tonight's episode, I know the question we kind of ask every time we wrap up, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you working on any books right now? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yes. I was an author with Regnery History, but they've been bought out by Skyhorse. And Skyhorse is now going to do this one, the Death of Hitler's War Machine, my last World War II book, in paperback. I'm writing a magnus opus, The Rise and Fall of the Southern Confederacy. It's going to be about 200,000 words. It's going to be a big book. But it's pretty ambitious to cover the whole history of the Confederacy in one volume. We may have to do two. And if we do, it will be volume one will be the rise of the Confederacy. Volume two will be the fall of the Confederacy. And it'll be possible to purchase one volume without the other, whatever you're interested in. And also, there's a man called Joe Congemi from the Duck Dynasty family. His family married into it. I call him Jersey Joe on the podcast. He's the last man that Phil Robertson mentored. Matter of fact, he was with Phil the day he died. And he decided he wanted to write a book about Phil and how it changed his life. In fact, he was from New Jersey. They call him Jersey Joe. And his life was a mess. But he was very successful in his business as fire chief. And he went down to the basement of the fire department one day and tried to click on a pornographic movie. And Duck Dynasty came on. He'd never heard of it. And he decided that these people down in Louisiana had something he lacked, something he wanted. And he had no idea he was ever even going to meet Phil Robertson. But he came to our church. Phil and I were attending the same church at that time. Phil always did the sermon, and he had me lead communion. And we sat by each other for 4.5 years, which was a real privilege. And anyway, he liked what he saw, and he told his wife when they got home, "Get packed. We're moving to Louisiana." And they did, and I can say it changed his life. And he now preaches and teaches. And Phil mentored him. He was the last one Phil got to mentor, and he decided to write a book. And he approached me, said he wanted me to write it. And he would tell me what to write. I said, because I can't write. And turns out he underestimated himself. He's not a bad writer. But we're we're putting that together now. We're about half through.
Well, that is definitely awesome. For those who don't know, a lot of my farm businesses and a lot of my duck hunting businesses, of course, I took a lot of inspiration from Phil spiritually and business wise. So that is awesome. I can't wait to read those books you're working on. Can't wait to have you on to talk about them either.
Well, eventually I'd like to get Joe on your show and talk about Phil, Southern culture. Like I say, he left New Jersey for a reason.
Well, you let him know the door is open anytime. We'd love to have him on. As we tell everybody, we don't just focus on 1861 to 1865 on this show, because Southern history and heritage goes all the way from Jamestown in 1607 all the way to present day. We have a very rich history, a very proud Southern history, and that's something we need to be talking about more, because as Carl has said, people have been taught to hate their Southern history, and how can they be proud of their Confederate history if they're not proud of their Southern history? So you let him know that anytime he wants to come on, just let us know. And as always, Dr. Mitcham, it's been great to have you on. I'm sure we're going to talk some more behind the scenes like we always do. But it is great to have you back on the show. I ask everybody, please share this episode out. Help us out. And, of course, one more plug. The links to both books, the Confederate Generals and Union Generals book, is in the chat. Please go support Dr. Mitcham. Again, he's a phenomenal historian and author. I've always had a great time reading his books. And from someone that is dyslexic, it is very helpful to have a book that's engaging. Also, when you have ADHD, it helps me learn. And one of the easiest books I've been able to pick up and understand and learn history. So please go support Dr. Mitcham on these new books. Even I'm going to buy the Union General book. I like to mess with Dr. Mitcham about that, because when he told me about it, he was like, you going to buy a copy? I was like, well, I'll try. That's my nice way of saying I wasn't, but I am going to buy one now. I think it'd be a very interesting read. And of course, you need to know all avenues of history if you're going to be able to talk about it. But again, please support Dr. Mitcham with those links below. Can't wait to have you back on again, Dr. Mitcham. I do want to remind everybody the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is coming up. So we have a great shirt for you to celebrate that. The South was right in 1861 because America was right in 1776. Make sure you have that for your 4th of July celebrations in 2026. As well as, again, please pick up the Encyclopedia of Union Generals and the Encyclopedias of Confederate Generals. Again, we want to thank all of our Patreon members. We did get a new Patreon member. It was Elliot Jackson. So thank you for joining us, Elliot. And we appreciate your support of the show. Thank you all for watching. I cannot wait to see y'all Thursday. Make sure to tune in Thursday, same Confederate time, same Confederate channel, for your weekly episode to look around the Confederation. Please send in some news. We will have a division on. I'm drawing a blank, but I believe it's the Arizona division that's going to come on and talk about some interesting things. So I'm looking forward to that. So again, I can't wait to see y'all Thursday. Make sure to share this out. And until next time, chat heads, remember, no fumar in the elevator. Good night, everybody.